What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over X attacks, actually implementing them this time and being able to use them, on top of actually using an appropriate amount in your super meter, or your combo gauge, or your super gauge, or whatever the heck we're calling this thing. I'm calling it a super meter, or a combo gauge, or a super combo gauge, because that's what Street Fighter refers to it as, but either way, I'm going to be calling it a super meter. So our super meter last time, basically, it did fill up when we got a super meter amount, but it didn't do any sort of checks for if we had enough to use that amount of super meter before we did the attack. It also didn't actually implement an X attack. We added functionality to do so, but we didn't have the attack ready, and we also did not have a different hitbox or damage modifier for that attack, or whatever we're going to do. We're going to take care of that today. So you can see here, if I'm beating the heck out of my opponent, and he's getting nice super meter, right? And at this point, I have about roughly 0.4, I'd say, or like 40% of my super meter. So now I should be able to use some of my super meter attacks. What we're going to do is, this is my normal, it's called the rifle butt attack from Mixamo. We're going to use a new attack, which is like 4 times the speed of that, so it's honestly way too fast, but just kind of to show the X attack. So I was calling these exceptional attacks because they're called X attacks in Street Fighter, but essentially when you press the button you want to use with the button modifier, the button to use part of your super meter with that attack, it changes the attack. So I've changed the speed and done more damage when I attack with it. So if I press those buttons at the same time, you can see that my super meter went down. I did a lot more damage than I normally would, about double. And the attack was extremely quick. And because it was so quick, I'm actually going to beat the heck out of this guy a little bit more so I can use it again away from the enemy so you can see it. So that's the attack. That's my X attack. That's what we're going to be going over today. This will set us up for super meters, or excuse me, super attacks like our ultimates, where we can get really dramatic and do a little camera pan in and all that stuff. So we'll be working on that pretty soon. I'm not sure if it'll be the next episode, but pretty soon. Also important to note here, one more thing before we get started. This will open up the ability for us to do things like input buffers. So I'll get more into that later on, but an input buffer or command buffer is essentially, it stores the amount of, or it stores all the past inputs you've given it for a given time or a given amount of inputs. And then once a specific set of inputs in a sequence are found, you'll do a certain attack, you know, a certain combo, certain move, whatever. Like Scorpion's hook is back forward, and then depending on your button, I think it's back forward light. You know, it's been a while, but basically it's that kind of like, oh, back A, you know, back forward A, quarter circle B, whatever. That's what an input or command buffer is. After this episode, you're going to see why those can become important and what we have to do to make that happen. Anyway, let me close out of this, and we'll get into the code to get started today. If you go into your character, and this is a good time to say this, we are at episode 30, I believe, maybe give or take an episode, but we are very far into this series, so if you would like to catch up on the series, then I will leave an iCard right here in the top right corner. That's a link to the very first episode in this series so you can get caught up. There's also a playlist that has every episode in it, which I can leave right here if you'd like to go through the whole thing without having to find every individual video. Anyway, if you're not interested in that, you're just interested in our X attacks, that's fine. One last iCard to the last episode where we started the super meter and all, just so you can get caught up with that. Then if you're not interested in any of those, or you're already caught up, that's perfectly fine. Let's get started. We don't need to do anything in our header file this time around. Honestly, we didn't add any variables or anything. We're just going to do a few checks in our exceptional attack, and then the majority of the work is going to be done in the AND and BP. So if you go to your C++ file for your template character, or your base character, scroll down to where we were calling our exceptional attacks, right here. Now last time, all we did was check if our light attack was used, or our medium attack was used or a heavy attack was used, and then we made sure if our super meter was less than 0, it's equal to 0, and that's actually it. So we were printing out some logs, but they weren't actually doing anything. So we were setting these booleans. Again, booleans didn't end up doing anything. What we need to do is decrease the super meter amount, which we are, but we need to make sure we have that amount available to us before we subtract it. So think of it this way. If we only have 50% of our meter available, but this move requires 75%, well, we don't want to use that move and then just go back to 0. I mean, maybe you do, but it doesn't really make sense, because then you can have 1% and just use that move and you would go back to 0%. So you could get a lot of cheap shots that way. Kind of like Dark Souls stamina bar, where you could do the same amount of damage on one hit with like the slightest amount of stamina that you can with a full bar. You can kind of abuse that to your liking. Anyway, what we're going to do is actually make sure we have the amount that we're going to subtract. So you could probably keep these or you probably should keep these as a variable, like light X attack amount, or something like that. And it would store the amount that it requires you to use for your light X attack. The only thing is you might have a lot of these and they might have different amounts, so you could have a lot of variables. It isn't necessarily bad. I mean, for all of your attacks are going to have to be highly modified, highly tweakable. That's why I wrote that create hitbox function in the AnimBP. So feel free to make a lot of variables here. There's a lot of people who would tell you otherwise, but personally, for a fighting game, you're going to need a lot of variables for your attacks and stuff. Feel free to customize it as much as you need so that it gives you the level that you want. Basically, just check and make sure that you have the super meter amount you're going to subtract. We were subtracting 0.2 last time, and I might have changed these. I think I did, so feel free to use whatever values you want. But 0.2, so I have to make sure we have at least that. Subtracting 0.35 for the medium, I have to make sure we have at least that. And subtracting 0.5 for the heavy, so I have to make sure we have at least that. Now, once we've done this, as long as we've had enough to subtract it, then we set our boolean to true, and then we subtract it, just like we were doing before. But now we can actually use these booleans, and we're going to in the AnimBP. Hey guys, I just wanted to cut in. I'm actually editing this right now, and I found a special edge case that some of you might run into while you're in the tutorial. So I wanted to make you aware of this issue and show you how to fix it. So I talk about input buffers a little bit at the start, but I'm actually going to talk about it more after this edit in the video. So you haven't heard that part yet, so don't get confused. But when I'm talking about input buffers will solve this very issue. However, since we haven't done input buffers yet, and that will be one of our next episodes, I want to show you how to fix it now so you don't have bugs in your project. Now, essentially, this whole Boolean state machine is good, but there are cases, especially when we get into more complex inputs, where it just is very complex to keep everything the correct way, as it were, so that everything works together. It's a very fragile system, admittedly, when you use it this way. That's why we're going over to the command buffers and the input buffers. But for now, and because we're still going to be using this in the future, just with modified functionality that makes it a lot more secure, a lot easier to use, I want to cover exactly what's going on. The can use X attack boolean that I've added here. It is an edit anywhere, blueprint read write, and it's just a boolean can use X attack. If we're trying to use two inputs at once and one happens to kind of take control, so you start using one even though you're pressing two buttons, well, if you press the other button a few frames late, that's okay. We still want to allow the player for that because we don't expect the player to press the buttons on the exact same frame every single time. You can have a little bit of frame, you can have a frame tolerance threshold or like something like that, where you have a few frames in between inputs where it will still take. Well, here's an easy way to do that with the system we have. So I have this boolean can use X attack. Now, in your CPP file, we're going to actually set it to true by default. Set it to true by default because we want to be able to use the X attack if we have the other stats required. So this doesn't mean like, oh yeah, you can use it right away, you're good to go. This means more of we are in a state in the animation where we can use our X attack. The only thing we're going to have to do here is in our function we were editing earlier, the start exceptional attack, add it as a variable. Just make sure before we set our light X attack, medium X attack, heavy X attack, or if you're just using one boolean for the X attacks, make sure before you set those to true, you make sure that can use X attack is true. The reason we're doing this is your light attack can be true. Maybe I press G, okay, and that's my light attack. And maybe I have the super meter amount, great. But if I start using this attack, this means whenever this light attack is used, so whenever I press G on the keyboard, and my super meter allows it, then I can press this exceptional attack at any point before it goes to false, and it will still go to the exceptional attack. What that looks like, and well, you won't be able to see it because I fixed it, but what it would look like is you would be able to do your attack, get like halfway through it, and then trigger your other attack. So it would look like kind of like you were doing this attack twice, maybe at different speeds. We don't want that. We want to do the attack once and be able to blend it. So now what happens, I didn't have to close it, but I did, is if I get enough super meter, let's say I'm getting my butt beat over here. Okay, there we go. Now I use my attack. You can see I can't press I'm pressing the exceptional attack like halfway through the animation, and I can't go to it, which is good because we don't want to be halfway through this attack, already spawn our hitbox, and then, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to go use this other attack. That would be bad. I mean, that's what a combo is essentially, but we don't want to do that here. We're trying to do a specific move, not a combo, but an X attack based on using two inputs. So we have to make sure we limit where they can use it. So if you press it in really fast succession like that, I think it's about 8 frames right now, you can see I actually cancel, and I actually don't have enough points to get some more super meter here. You can see I can actually cancel into my other attack early enough on the attack before we spawn that active hitbox for it. You should probably do it before you spawn the proximity hitbox, but my point remains the same. That's why we're doing that. If that doesn't make sense, it's okay. We're going to be switching some stuff over to input buffers in one of the next few episodes, and a lot of this is going to become cleaner. Don't worry, we're not going to be changing the state machine too much or removing everything we've done or anything like that, but it's going to make it much easier. We're not going to have all these rules to make sure our state machine is acting accordingly. We're going to have these features that allow us to make sure we're using the move we want. So make sure you go to build solution. As always, just a reminder, go into your Unreal and hit compile. Make sure you get those code changes to Blueprint. I don't know why my mutant isn't open. I just had him open, I swear. Here he is. Couldn't find him. Okay. Now, we were doing something called reset variables last time. And this is where we set everything back to false, basically between attack transitions and things like that. I'm not going to touch anything with this today, so don't worry about it. The reason I'm bringing it up is we're going to be using these variables, or these events, these anim notifies, for all the transitions a lot today. They're going to be kind of a priority in this episode. Just make sure that these transitions are going into your state machine. And I'll go over it, don't worry. Just giving you a reminder early on, that way we can be prepared. There's a few things we need to do here. For one, if we're having an X attack, we could just speed up the rate, and that's fine. Maybe we apply a little effect. He starts glowing or starts having smoke around him when he's using the X attack, whatever. You could use the same attack. I personally am going to make a new animation for it. Now, for the animation, if I could find it, punch. For the animation, I just actually duplicated it. So for this one, this is my animation file for my regular one. I right-clicked on it and duplicated right here, and then made X rifle punch. It's the same animation. In fact, I even have the notifies in the same spot. But I did change the notifies and make new ones, like this, so that I could independently change their values. Now, you don't have to do this, especially if your X attacks, or whatever, your super attacks here that you're doing, are going to be doing like a base modifier to your damage. For example, if you do an attack and it does 5 damage, all your exceptional attacks are going to do double their regular attack damage, then you don't need to make a new animation for this at all, and I want it. However, if you want your X attacks to be split up, Like in Street Fighter, for example, again, they have a lot of attacks where you do your X attack and it's actually different from the attack that would normally be. It's not just a damage modifier, it actually does different functionality or different animation or things like that. So in case you want to have it that way, I would make a new animation duplicated off of that. If you already have a new animation, that's fine. Just make sure you have a new set of notifies if you're going to be doing it this way. With those new notifies, we can do what we always do. You can see that I have my rifle punch here. I put them next to each other just for comparison. My regular and my X rifle punch. So you can see the damage is doubled. I kept everything else the same, except the pushback distance I put is greater. But modify them however you want. That's exactly the point of this. And remember, these notifies that I'm calling come from the notifies that you put on your animation here. X rifle punch active. So you just go into here and type X rifle punch active. Okay? Now, once you've done that, make sure you do your start and your end as well. For me, the proximity box has always been the same just because I haven't cared enough about it to tweak it yet. It can come into play a little bit later where it's more important. Same with end. Just make sure you reset everything as normal. Delete your hitboxes. Okay. But what we need to do here that's going to be a little bit different than the rest of the attacks we've done is the way we add it in the state machine. Now, I've brought it all the way over here so you can clearly see it. These are a little bit hard to see just because they're kind of an ugly color, but this is a shared transition just like we've gone over with the green and the red here. What we need to do is add some logic to determine if we should go to the light attack or the X light attack. The reason this becomes a bit of an issue is because without any sort of input buffer or command buffer, as soon as we press the light attack button, it's going to want to go here. Now we can put priority to go to this one, but we don't have any sort of delay in between. So unless we press these buttons at the exact same time, and I mean like down to as far as the computer can track these buttons being pressed, we are not going to be able to know which one we're going to go to. Right? So we can kind of configure this in a way that'll work, and it'll be fine. You could actually use it. But it's going to be a little bit ugly, which is why we're probably going to need to do a command buffer or input buffer. For now, this will be fine. And again, you can actually keep this, but I'm going to show you, we'll probably add on to this later with some input buffer functionality. So just to recap, to go from idle to light attack, all we're doing is checking our boolean was light attack used. Was light attack used is essentially just have we press the button that the light attack is bound to. If we have, go do the light attack, and the light attack is just this. It's got a play rate of 2 because I sped it up, and that's it, right? Plain and simple. But if we want to go from idle to X light attack, so right click and add a new state, make it X light attack. I have my new animation here, my X rifle punch, and I've set my play rate. I've exposed it just so I could show you, so you could use an animation speed modifier here, but you don't have to. I'm not going to in this episode. But I've made it 0.5. Now, I've slowed it down to show you guys something. This would probably be like 4. It was 4 before, so it could be sped up. But I slowed it down in the middle of debugging, or in the middle of making this video, so that I could kind of show you what was going on. If we play our game, and we're not quite done, so I'll show you the rest of it in a second. But now, if I take enough damage, and I get my super meter up, and then I go ahead and do my combo, you can see he cancels out of the first attack to go into the light attack. Now, that's fine. That makes sense, right? That's because of this logic right here, where we can go from light attack to X light attack. But the problem is that we don't necessarily want to do that. You want to be able to press the buttons essentially at the exact same time or within a certain amount of frames and have that occur. So, what you can do to fix this, if you want this logic to occur, is go into the attack that you're going to be canceling from. So such as the light punch. If we want to be able to do it from one state to the other, because our, the way we press our buttons isn't perfect, then we'll want to do it before rifle punch start, most likely, or within a very, very few amount of frames. So probably right around here. You can make a new anim notify that's like can go to X attack or something like that, just like we have can combo. So I'm going to place it right around here, right around 8 frames. And you can add a new track, by the way, to make this easier. You can add a new notify and can use X light, something like this. Now, when we go back into our anim BP, let's go into our event graph, grab this. Now, in the anim notify we just made, can use X light. This is the one we're adding in the animation. We want to look for our mutant character reference, and we want to set our X attack, if we can use it or not, to false once we've hit this anim notify. Because essentially, once this anim notify has been hit, we've surpassed the amount of frames where we're allowing the inputs to be pressed. This way, you don't go off and do a bunch of different inputs that it takes at any point in the animation. And also, having this new boolean where we can just set the X attack to be false and not do something like set the was light attack used to false. This will still allow for combos and things down the line, but this specific input with X attacks is disabled. We want to make sure that we do it at a frame that looks good, that looks neat, or at least as neat as can be. When we have input buffers, we'll be able to hold 2 inputs at the same time. So if you press them at the exact same time, we won't need to check 2 booleans. We'll only need to check 1 state, 1 input sequence, and then we'll be able to go here. So a lot of this will become cleaner in the next few episodes, but for now, the logic will stay the same. So just keep it for now. We'll have a few changes, and this will be neater. Okay, but you can see all I have is my animation in there. And all I'm checking is was light X attack used, which remember, we're setting that in Visual Studio when we use our exceptional attack. All right. Now, to return from the X light attack, we do it as we normally would for any of our states. We click on our transition node. We don't have anything in here. It's empty. But we go to our details panel on the right, go to transition, and turn on automatic rule based on sequence player and state, which again basically means that once the animation is done, it will return to this state. It will transition to this state. When we return to this state, we want to make sure that we have the end attack transition. So when we're returning, we're going to reset our variables, because remember, that's what these do. End attack transition here just resets our variables, deletes our hitboxes. It's the same way light attack does it in pretty much all of our attacks. And just like our other attacks, we're going to start attack transition if we go straight from idle to our X light attack. Now, if you don't know how to make a shared transition, like these two are, because these are both was light X attack used. If you want to make a shared transition like this, all you got to do is go up here to transition rule sharing. So if you go to one that doesn't have a share, you hit promote to shared. It will ask you to type in a name. I typed in light X attack, and then when you go to another node that you want to use that shared transition on, you click this and then find the name you just entered. That's how I got these to be shared. Something else you might want to do, just as a little safeguard here, if you want 2 attacks to be equally as likely to happen, for example, light attack and X light attack, if we don't have to go from idle to light attack to go to X light attack, and we don't, we can go straight from idle to X light attack if we do the right inputs, then we want to make sure the easier of the 2 has a lower priority order, because in the off chance that we do happen to press these inputs at the exact same time that the computer captures, it's going to go to light attack automatically because there's only one state there. However, if you click on the transition from idle to light attack, its priority order is 1 by default. Everything's going to be 1. If you make it a higher number, then it will be pushed behind another transition that would occur earlier. So, for example, idle to X light attack has a priority order of 1. So if these states could be true at the exact same time, then it would actually go to X light attack and not go to light attack at all. So just a little thing you can add there. Last thing to note here is in the transition notifications from idle to light attack, I'm not using the start attack transition, just because it's going to disable the light attack, the light X attack, if we press them at the same time. You could do this. It would be okay for you to do that and just reset the variables, but then you would have to press both buttons to go from light attack to X light attack. And you can see how complicated this is. And this is exactly my point. So this is why we need an input buffer or command buffer. So sure, I explained it, and a lot of it was probably hit or miss because it was a lot of specifics, right? We want to make this system easier. So what we're going to do in one of the next episodes, we might do ultimate attacks first before we do this, but in one of the next episodes, we want to have an input buffer or command buffer. That way we can check for the specific command as opposed to doing all these booleans. Again, the actual state machine will stay the same, so don't worry. We're not going to be changing a lot of what we've done. We didn't waste a lot of our time doing this. This is one way you could do it, and you can make it work. 100% you can make it work. But it is complicated, and it is time-consuming. And a single issue, oh, I used the wrong transition here, or I didn't put the right notification in here, that can waste a lot of your time. So now that we've gotten to this point, and we have a pretty successful little game here, you can do a lot with it right off the bat. We want to get into making it easier to do these things, because there's a lot of things we can do, but it can get very complicated. So don't worry, we'll be cleaning this up, and I planned on this. I planned for this, so I'm not just leading you guys on some windy road and being like, yeah, we're going to switch this now. I did this on purpose. This is how I learned how to make a fighting game originally. And it's great. And in fact, the states are good, and we're going to be keeping the booleans. But for more specific things, like the X attacks and things like quarter circle inputs and things like that, we're going to be using this new input buffer system. So just for the record, you can do it this way, and this will work. But we're going to be making it better. Okay, so if we play our game here, we can see our X attack in action finally. Let's walk over to our opponent. Let's take some damage. There we go. Now we've got plenty of super meter. Now I want to use my X attack. Remember, you only have a few frames, so it could take a few tries to get it right. Especially on keyboard, it's not as easy because, well, you kind of have to know where the keys are going to click when you press them in. So, but I'm going to press my keys. And you can see I missed it the first time, but got it that time. There's my X attack. And you can see it did substantial damage compared to the first attack. It did literally double. But there you go. Your X attacks are working. It depleted from the super meter, and you are solid. Like I said, in one of the next episodes, we'll be going over the input or command buffer, which will clean up this situation where there's too many booleans involved and too many specific states. And we will also be going over how to do things like quarter circle or, like back forward A, things like that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped you. If it did, please subscribe. It does more for the channel than anything else, and I just really appreciate it. It lets me know that I'm doing a good job in teaching you and showing you the right and wrong ways to do things, or the easier and the harder ways to do things. That way you can learn. If you did have any issues, then please feel free to join the Discord. I can't leave a link in the iCard because YouTube doesn't like Discord links, but it's in the description under Discord. You can join the server. I'd be happy to help you. There's plenty in the community who would be happy to help you. And I can use pictures and videos, which is easier than YouTube comments. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27. You can watch me somehow survive at Dark Souls 2, or any Dark Souls game, whatever one we're currently playing. And try and shut Ashley up, even though she doesn't stop in Resident Evil 4, because she just continuously talks. Anyway, guys, I'm Shawnthebro. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.